Hey friends, how's it going? Today I want to talk to you about a question as old as the ancient question if Pokemon or Digimon is a better franchise. Today is all about the question, should you skip the story of Final Fantasy XIV? Why, you might ask? Why are you asking such a controversial question? A few weeks back I posted a little meme on Reddit about the in-game conversation, and let's say it turned into a really interesting comment section. And believe me, I read through all the comments in that comment section, and I tried my best to categorize every comment into a section like, is it pro story, is it anti story, or is it somewhere in between? But to be honest, guys, that didn't really work out because apart from a few extreme opinions, most of the time people were trying to understand the other side and were trying to explain and discuss their point of view. And yeah, guys, today's video is all about discussing this topic. I want to show you a few of the comments and I want to discuss with you the topic of skipping the story in general. Okay, but before anybody is coming in here with pitchforks or torches, I want to say I really love the story of Final Fantasy XIV, but I can also understand why some people are skipping the story. I mean, I myself in general love long stories that takes the time to build the story, and in case of Final Fantasy XIV, I actually watched every cutscene and I read all of the cutscene dialogues and of the quest dialogues and, well, every speech bubble there is, you know. Also, I've been playing this game for like 8 years now, and for the better half of it I was playing the game alone, so it was always great to have a long story like that always brought me back in, you know. But apart from that, I was always able to understand why people were playing MMOs for the social aspect of the game or the gameplay aspect. I mean, I myself come from Ragnarok Online, a super old Korean grinder MMO game, I would say. And Ragnarok Online was all about gameplay and, well, talking to people. It was most of the time more like an interactive chat room where you were just grinding. And yeah, that's definitely different from Final Fantasy XIV. But yeah, now let's jump into the comments and stick with the topic of stories that takes a time. A lot of the comments were about the presentation of the story in general. For example, a user wrote that he appreciates the story, but he feels like it's pretty badly told, especially in terms of long cutscenes with little to no interactivity. Others also think that the presentation of the story is heavily flawed, or that the cutscenes in general are overbearing. For them, the feeling came up that they just want to play the game sometimes. Then there was a comment that really caught my eye, because he was telling about veteran players that are forgetting that newcomers have to play the base game and through all of the expansion packs. And yeah, that user also got frustrated because he just wanted to play the game with a friend and that he had to play through all of the story quests to well reach the endgame content to actually play something of the new content with his friends. Of course, it's always possible to play the old content with friends because of the level synchronization, but I guess this does not apply if you want to play the current content, you know? Of course, it's also different if you're a veteran player and you only have to play the current patch of the story. So you don't have to play like hours and hours of story. And I guess I can imagine that there are a few newcomers who are playing the base game and they're so overwhelmed by the story that they are just quitting the game entirely. Which exactly brings me to my next question. How long is the story of Final Fantasy XIV in total? Because everybody plays the game a little bit differently, and sometimes they are taking more time to do side quests or do crafting and whatever. So I don't know, how long does it take to actually reach the end game content? And yeah, to be honest, it's really hard to answer because I tried to look it up and different sources are saying different things. For example, the website howlongtobeat.com shows an average game time of 372 hours over all game styles, which totals in 15.5 days, which is actually really long. Also, for the 5th anniversary of Final Fantasy XIV, Square Enix released an infographic, and I guess it was around the time for Stormblood. That infographic showed the total length of all the cutscenes, and that totaled to 4,500 minutes. Of course, I have to add to that the infographic also states that they were using the unending journey to watch the cutscenes, and they were using the auto advanced settings at a default speed, and also that the cutscenes were all in Japanese. Also, I guess it comes down on how you are watching a cutscene yourself. Because if you're reading a speech bubble and you're finished and you click yourself to advance the cutscene, of course it's also a lot more faster than using the auto advance feature. But still, even if you advance the cutscenes yourself, you still have to watch a lot of cutscenes. And this infographic is only up to Stormblood, so it is not including Shadowbringers. And if we calculate it a little bit, 4,500 minutes are actually 75 hours. And yeah, let's include a little bit of trivia. You know the Fast and the Furious movies, right? They are like, I don't know how many there are. There are too many to count. But even if you watch all of the Fast and Furious movies back to back, you still only reach 19 hours. So try to compare that to the Final Fantasy story, right? So to summarize it, it's actually a lot of time. So I guess in a sense, everybody who sticks to the story for such a long time and is also enjoying the story must have a certain feeling. As feelings that even I feel, and let's say we call it passion. So most of the time, people feel passionate about something where they invest a lot of time in. That could be a hobby, work, a car, I don't know, stuff like that. But most of the time, people are really passionate and try to protect what they are feeling. Or like this user said, people adopt the games as part of their own person, which is like a really interesting statement because you share so much with the story that you take it upon your heart and, well, it becomes a part of yourself, you know, like something that you take with you through your entire life, I guess. So let's try to remember stuff like a Lord of the Rings or Harry Potter. A lot of people who have read those books are still thinking about them nowadays when they are adults and everything, you know? So I guess people like that are really passionate. And yeah, if you're passionate about something, most of the time you try to share it with other people, you know? And who doesn't know that feeling that you try to share it, but people just ignore it, like my other YouTube videos. But anyways, that also explains why some people are feeling like that in the comment section. For example, one user said that he only starts to care about people who skip the cutscenes when they start to complain about the story that it makes no sense. Other people are more drastic in a way. For example, this user states that it drives him up the wall when people are starting to complain about the story because they skipped so much stuff, and even worse, when they bought a main story quest skip in the Mock Station store. There's also this user who states that it is a red flag for friendship if there is somebody who is skipping cutscenes and stories in RPGs, but it doesn't really matter if that person doesn't start to complain about the story. Also, there's another user who sees it as disrespectful to the rest of the player base, to the story itself, and to the developers if somebody is skipping the story. But in the end, this is only one side of the coin. The people who are passionate about the story and about the game, who try to protect it. But what about the other side? What about the people who are skipping the story? For example, this user states that his whole experience with the game got negatively affected by the community because he feels that the community gets upset if there's somebody who is not enjoying the story as much as they do, or who is outright skipping the story. Or for example, this user just wishes that people wouldn't get so angry because he tried several times to get invested into the story, but he's just bouncing off of it, even though he tried his hardest to, well, get into the story. Of course, it is a nice thing to stand behind your passion. You're trying to protect the source of your passion, in that case, the story. But it's always wrong to attack people over differences. And I mean, I can understand both sides in this situation. But everybody should be able to enjoy the game. Which also brings me back to the question, why are people exactly skipping the story? And why do they not enjoy it? Because also a lot of people say that from Heavensward on, the story gets really, really good. So let's take a quick look at the last comment again. This user also states that he just can't get through a Realm Reborn, which is, well, the basis of the whole game and for all the expansion packs. So let's take a look at the Realm Reborn for a bit, because there's surprisingly a lot of comments who are actually criticizing a Realm Reborn and stating that it is like the root of the problems. For example, this user states that he enjoyed the story of A Realm Reborn, but not how it was told, because he doesn't have so much time to play every night, and there were a lot of days where he was just running back and forth, just reading text. This user says that there were around 40 to 50 quests where he asked himself if this really needed a quest. This user even recommends to read the story summary of A Realm Reborn because he skimmed so many cutscenes and he still understood everything in the end. Those two users even say that the story just drags on and on forever and that the pacing of the story is just plain terrible. And that was only the tip of the iceberg. There were still a lot of comments who were talking about that A Realm Reborn is the worst part of Final Fantasy XIV, that the pacing is terrible, and that A Realm Reborn is just for character building. But you know what? Even though I really liked the story, and I really liked A Realm Reborn, I can understand the feelings of those guys, because it does take a lot of time to complete A Realm Reborn, and a lot of things like dungeons or trials or whatever are locked behind story progression. Together with a limited amount of abilities you can use at that point of the game, I guess it can really feel like you're just walking from point A to point B, just to press the same 3 buttons over and over again. Also, most of the time you are playing the story on your own, because I think all of the story duties you can play are single player duties, so most of the time you aren't even teaming up with other players or your friends, maybe for the trials and for the dungeons. On the other side, A Realm Reborn lays the groundwork for all of the expansions and for the entire story so far. Also, you are starting out as an adventurer in the beginning, just arriving in town and everything, and you are slowly working up your way, because you're not starting out as a hero, and in my opinion, everything happens in a, well, believable way in that universe. And like I said, you are not instantly starting out as a hero. You're slowly getting to know the characters, you're meeting a lot of characters, you're spending time with those characters, you're getting slowly acquainted with everybody. And, well, just like in real life, you're building relationships to each other. And yeah, that is one of the most interesting parts. Nobody is trusting you from the beginning, but you have to work with everybody to build that trust. And yeah, the story takes its time, but that time is used to do the world building. Step by step, the story is getting into details to explain why the world is like it is. You are building up your knowledge about the world, and like your character, you start to see the world with new eyes with every step you take. In my opinion, enjoying the story at that slow pace is like investing into something, putting effort into something. I mean, I wouldn't have felt like I did at the end of A Realm Reborn if I wouldn't have taken the time to get invested like that. I mean, I don't remember every tidbit of the story, but I remember my emotions, my feelings. I remember the laughs I had. I remember the tears I shed. I remember the goosebumps, the ups and downs. And I wouldn't have felt that if I wouldn't have taken the time to get invested in that story. And I mean, I know it takes a lot of time, but it's like you're building a relationship to the game itself, I guess. And I guess this is why I really like this comment, because this guy is talking about his friends he invited to Final Fantasy XIV. Most of his friends just rushed the game and, well, they quit at one point. But there was this one friend who was lagging behind, and he asked him to take his own time to enjoy the game. And the interesting part is that this guy is still playing. This one friend he asked to take his time, which is interesting, right? I mean, by building a relationship to the game or getting attached to the game, it feels differently to play it, I guess. Because, well, you want to know how it is continuing and everything. And I don't know, you're seeing those characters and everything, and, well, you are attached, you know? I don't know how to put this into words, but it feels different. But like I said before, I can understand the other side. Because if you are in this game for the gameplay aspect or for the social aspect, it can get frustrating to play the story. I mean, I remember that Square Enix condensed the quests of the post-game patch of A Realm Reborn, so there are less quests you have to complete. But I remember that even I felt exhausted at times because there were so many to do. I think it could be good to streamline the game a little bit more for new players who have to play through the base game and through all of the expansion packs, but honestly, I don't know. Because in the end, if you would change everything from the story, or you would condense the story even more, wouldn't that change the Final Fantasy XIV we know and love? I guess that is something that you yourself have to decide for yourself. But I can only ask everybody who is new to the game, please try the story, stick to the story, because I think everybody who is sticking to the story gets rewarded in the end. But yeah, I'm trying to wrap this up now. In my opinion, there's only one thing that matters in the end. Enjoy the game, take in the world, make memories with your friends, accomplish challenges, do whatever makes you happy. Enjoy the game in your own way. Because come on guys, the world is big enough so everybody can enjoy the game in their own way without getting into conflict with anybody. What matters most is that you have fun. And if you have more fun to just play the game by skipping the story, that's okay. But if you like the story and you want to stick to it, that's fine too. Everybody should play the game their own way, you know? And I always say, the more players enjoy the game, the more content we get, be it gameplay or be it story. Everybody wins in the end if we just have fun with the game and we play it. But yeah guys, this is the end of the video. Tell me in the comments below what you think about this topic, how you play Final Fantasy XIV and what you think of the story. Tell me everything. I'm looking forward to your comments. And yeah guys, happy gaming, enjoy Final Fantasy, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.